The UK general election in July 2024 inevitably became about expecting a new government following the incumbent's poor performance. One of the major issues gripping the nation is mass migration.
The fight is between the globalist agenda and those who wish to promote and protect the nation states.
You have to establish Islam by force.
Yeah.
Your country will get taken over. Those people don't respect your culture.
You don't want the truth. That's the problem that you have.
This is our home. We have nowhere else to go.
The Met are all over the place. Oh! What are you doing?
In the UK, immigration has been a highly debated topic for the past 25 years, with various governments emphasizing the importance of mass migration to the country's economy. I arrived in the UK as a 14-year-old in 2004 with my mother, who was a political refugee from Iran.
So yeah, this is the area I grew up in. This is actually the area that I ended up when I first came into the UK. Lee Green in Lewisham, southeast London. It was the first place also I experienced when it comes to Britain and what Britain looks like, which is quite interesting. Obviously, for those who know, my mother was a political refugee. She was saved by the British Embassy. When she came here afterwards, I was able to join her because I was under 18. This area was extremely diverse even back then. But for me, there was still one common culture. And I think this area, obviously, over the years has actually, well, gentrification's happened. We actually have more white middle-class families or young professional families. But in fact, crime has actually gone up, which is kind of fascinating. We have more gangs, and you can actually see the division inside the different cultures and different tribes, which we didn't have before, even though it was already extremely diverse. But everybody was more British, everybody was more united back then. This is the problem we're currently facing, obviously, when it comes to certain parts of the UK.
The media has claimed that mass migration has always been a part of British life. However, the reality is that in 1951, less than 4% of the population was foreign-born. This proportion doubled to 8% in 2001, and by 2016, it had nearly doubled again to 15%.
So yeah, that's where I grew up, and it's actually slightly changed. These were the council flats where they built in the 50s, when they were just in a rush to build, and it actually looked even uglier than now. But the interesting thing about growing up here when I came here was actually because, usually speaking, when other cultures and other people from different countries come into developed world nations, there's a culture shock which they usually look up. They're like, oh, this is impressive. And what I noticed even back then, about 20, 25 years ago, that there were still local people here, British people, you know, white and black, who were complaining even back then that this is the worst country, we are in southeast London, we could never get anywhere, this is the end of the world for us. And my mother and I were just looking and thinking, really? What we are seeing is a lot of opportunities. What we are seeing is you could go wherever you want. Doesn't matter where you come from.
The major turning point occurred when the new Labour government implemented policy changes after its landslide victory in May 1997. Over 13 years, net migration had caused the non-British population to swell to over 3 million.
So, to understand why immigration levels are where they are now, you have to go back to Tony Blair, 1997, the year that something happened. In 1998, Tony Blair produced the Human Rights Act, essentially wedding the European Court of Human Rights case law, its Articles 2 and 8, which say that all migrants have a right to life and a right to a private and family life, into English law, merging the two, stopping pretty much any deportation of an illegal immigrant. He also cancelled exit checks. So that means we don't know how many illegal immigrants are in the country, but in 2017, the Oxford Migration Observatory estimated that this means that up to 1.2 million people were here illegally at that time. This was before the Conservatives put mass immigration on steroids under Boris Johnson. Then in 2004, when the EU adopted 10 new member states, Tony Blair promised that this wouldn't mean free movement with Eastern Europe. Well, then between 1997 and 2010, by the time he was out of office, this led to 2.2 million people coming in as of net migration.
Labour viewed mass migration as a crucial aspect of restructuring the new global economy. In 2007, the new Prime Minister Gordon Brown addressed the CBI regarding the new global financial system.
All these new challenges are bringing together about the biggest restructuring we have ever seen, not just of the global economy, but of the global order as a whole.
Why do we have mass migration on a legal basis? In my view, it's because successive governments over the last 25 years have ever increasingly turned their back on the quaint concept of a nation state. And they've governed alongside most other leaders of Western democracies for what they see, this is the charitable interpretation, what they see as the global good. And through the prosperity of the globe, they wish to deliver domestic prosperity in the United Kingdom. And in the pursuit of what is good for the globe, obviously that which suits the national state becomes of subsidiary importance. The less charitable interpretation is they're all slightly hijacked by large corporations, multinationals, and so on, who they meet at the World Economic Forum, and they're all cozying up to each other in the pursuit of feathering their own nests. And so the globalism to which I referred isn't born out of any altruistic aim for the betterment of the globe, but simply for their back pockets. So we're hooked on cheap imported labour. It's a kind of drug which we think will solve the problems, but it doesn't. It might artificially boost GDP, but GDP per capita has actually been shrinking for the last 9 quarters on the trot.
When I spoke to former Prime Minister Liz Truss, when she said that she wanted to lower immigration, the Blair era Quangos, the Office for Budgetary Responsibility and Independent Bank of England, said that if she wanted to do that, they'll release damaging economic reports to sabotage England's economic standing on the world stage, so they have to keep immigration high. The fact that the Conservative government did not jettison these supposedly impartial and neutral organisations that insist endlessly on more migration is a failing of their own making, and they're paying the price for that, because now the rallying cry at this election from the right is to deliver the Conservatives 0 seats. It is a call to punish them, no matter if Labour gets in or not.
Labour's other initiative was to bring Britain in line with the European Court of Human Rights.
So this is the other thing Tony Blair did, was to elevate the European Court of Human Rights above his own creation, the Supreme Court, as the supreme judicial body for human rights laws in this country. But the problem with the European Court of Human Rights being the supreme body for human rights in this country is that it isn't subject to any laws. The European Court of Human Rights doesn't make its judgments based on laws created by a democratically elected legislature. It has 17 or 18 guiding principles, and it can interpret those principles as it sees fit. And the problem we have is when it passes a ruling, because of the way our law works, that becomes basic domestic law in the United Kingdom. So what we've got is an entity which is actually making human rights law without any democratic mandate to make it. It is fundamentally wrong. Leave aside the boats and everything else. It's a fundamentally wrong principle to have. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 21 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, says that it's an inalienable human right to be governed democratically. Yet we have a supranational body making laws in the UK with no democratic mandate. The imposition of the European Court of Human Rights on the UK is in itself a breach of our human rights. Now that's the idiocy of the whole thing.
After 14 years of Conservative government, the successive promises to reduce migration to the tens of thousands were never fulfilled.
The Conservative Party have destroyed themselves over the issue of immigration. Since 2010 to 2024, 3.7 million people have been let into the country. That means in the last 2 years, 1 in 30 people that is walking around in the UK now came here in the last 2 years. That's madness. And the reason the Conservative Party have done this are again for economic and ideological reasons. The economic reasons are pretty simple. It's around 20 to 25% of Conservative Party donors are house builders. So they have the incentive to keep demand high, meaning they keep prices high, but they keep house building levels quite low. They ration the supply. And this is pretty evident because, as Robert Jenrick, former immigration minister, has recently published, 89% of the reason why house building demand is outpacing supply is because of annual immigration. We need to build a new house every 2 minutes just to meet the demand from immigration. But the ideological reasons are pretty simple. Lots of conservatives would rather be liked by the kind of woolly blank slate liberals and open borders leftists who would sooner see them dead than victorious than make good on their electoral mandate to reduce immigration to the numbers of the tens of thousands that they've promised in 2010, 2015, 2017, 2019 and now 2024, and nobody believes them anymore. They have no credibility, and this is why they're going to be voted out on the issue of immigration alone.
Because of our extremely liberal secular society, it's got so extreme that it kind of pushes people to be ashamed of their own heritage. At the same time, we are told that anybody else from the outside, we have to be proud and embrace their heritage. You can't undermine their heritage, but you should be ashamed of being English. And even when it comes to the local communities, it's not, at this point it's no longer about English or British, it's simply about the local people who happen to be Anglo-Saxon in these places. There's a reason that these people were complaining years ago about obviously the shift in terms of their tribes and their areas. Back then, you had the likes of Tony Blair and all the cosmopolitan liberals who were saying, why is it all these white people who hardly have any immigration in their areas are complaining? It's because their instinct was right. They could see what could happen in their areas, and that's why they were resisting. They were not being racist or anything like that.
One aspect of mass migration that concerns me the most is the rise of radical Islam in the UK. Radical Islam has been present in Great Britain since the 1970s, but it did not gain wider public attention until the 7th of July 2005 London bombings. With nearly 5 million Muslims and 2,000 mosques, and the Office for National Statistics estimating 13 million Muslims by 2050, the future of this country will be shaped by what happens within this demographic. There is a growing influence on British politics from a coalition of activists from the left associated with Corbynism and the right associated with Hamas, known as the Red-Green Alliance.
When it comes to the future of Britain, if nothing changes, I think what I see is a blank canvas being created for a while. When there's a vacuum, there's not going to be any sort of common value because it's become a taboo. If you promote English or British values, they have created this environment that they're telling foreigners, for example, that you can't integrate, you can't belong into it. They still tell me, the political left always tell me, now you can't be British, you're brown. They are the racists. And that's why we're not going to be able to actually promote that kind of set of common values. What we're going to then end up having, there's going to be a vacuum, and there will be other cultures who are more proactive. For example, when it comes to the Islamist side, the political ideology of Islam, they're not going to be ashamed of promoting their values. They will come and they would either convert people or create isolated areas, different pockets, that they will create their own community inside the wider community.
Democracy. Take advantage of the democratic process and use your vote. Use your vote to vote against those who allow such atrocities to happen. Use your vote to better the cause, to progress the movement, the revolution that is about to happen, and the revolution will start in Bradford West on the 4th of July. Inshallah.
The terrorist attack on Israel carried out by Hamas resulted in over 1,000 deaths. Subsequently, Israel launched a massive military response in Gaza, resulting in thousands of fatalities and sparking widespread demonstrations across the globe. I spoke to Josh, who lives in central London, about his experiences with these demonstrations.
Obviously, you live in central London and not too far from where these weekly protests happen every Saturday at least, and sometimes other days as well. On a personal level, how does it make you feel?
I can remember when the marches started to form. Ancestral trauma is a thing. I work as a therapist. I know that ancestral trauma gets inherited through generations. for the Jews right now, these marches, I believe, and I can speak on behalf of myself, but I think a lot of people are being reminded of that they emanate similar qualities to the Nazi-like marches. So I can remember looking out this window here. We live very near to Trafalgar Square. Palestinian flags. I saw a van of people pull up, like a big black taxi van. People got out, all with Palestinian flags. Where did they all get them from? 3 days after, or whatever. Huge. And it just... I was like, oh, here we go. We're entering into something. And honestly, on the days, every single Saturday, it feels like there is a smog of hatred in the air.
We're going to wait. So watch a few of the videos and can you stop spreading propaganda for
What's the propaganda of them?
Just here to get people to react, man. That's
No, really,
I've checked you. I've checked your thing
I don't
online.
provoke anyone. If you come to me,
I know
have you
hate
seen what
marches,
they're
it's just
saying?
your
Have you seen the chants here?
Keep your personal
From the river to the
opinion.
sea. Do you believe from the
Oh
river
yeah,
to the sea?
I do.
So what are you going to do with the Jews?
Huh?
What's going to happen to the Jews?
The Jews are with us. It's just Zionists are not with us because we don't.
They
have
are Jews as
no,
well.
No. Jews and Zionists two different things. You're
They're
a
still
When you've got crowds of people marching and chanting, criticising the only Jewish state, fair enough, every state can be criticised. I completely respect that. But what I don't understand is the obsession for it just to be Israel. The fact that it's only when Israel is involved, only when Jews are involved, that these marches take place.
What is she doing? Did she just call me a child killer? What are you doing? Stop covering the camera. Move away from me. Move away from me. Move away from me.
You know, it's the first time in history you've got feminists justifying rape. You've got people from the LGBT community supporting Hamas who kill gay people. We've been doing mental gymnastics trying to understand the justification, you know, the yeah buts, which has been very alienating and scary.
Society requires a settled culture. We don't have a settled culture at the moment. And you see this right across the Western developed world. France breaks down into interethnic violence frequently. The US does it frequently. And we're seeing it increasingly in other parts of Europe. And we're seeing it now increasingly in the UK, sadly.
The reason you're seeing religious sectarianism playing out on the streets of London ever since the atrocities of October the 7th is precisely because of this blank slate approach to borders. This is what Renaud Camus called the second career of Adolf Hitler. In the attempt to prevent the guard towers of Auschwitz being reconstructed, even in a beautiful place like Britain who fought the Nazis, we must insist on being blind to cultural, historical and ethnic differences. And what this ends up doing is, in the very nations that seek to prevent the kind of anti-Semitism the Nazis wrought on the Jewish people, you then import Muslims by the hundreds of thousands of millions who have that historical, ethnic and religious grievance against those people, and then it plays out as marches for intifada and jihad on behalf of Hamas ever since October the 7th, every weekend and Wednesday in Westminster. So, ironically, our attempt to not be seen as racist or far-right has imported the exact kind of ethno-religious violence that we see across the world and was similar to what we saw in Germany in the 1930s. It's a purely suicidal strategy and we need to stop it.
We are not going to be intimidated into not having marches, not having demonstrations, not having speaking, not speaking out. And to those MPs over there in Parliament who say these marches are the marches of hate, they have to be stopped. My advice to them is come on one and feel the love.
But it's not just Israel they hate, it's the West. It's England, it's America. They are marching with people that want them dead. And only when it's too late will they realise that.
How can we, re-establish the Khilafah again?
So there are three methods, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Our brothers from Hizb ut-Tahrir who believe you do some grassroots dawah, you awaken the community, you awaken the ummah, but really you seek power from a select group of elite who will give you nusra, and then you do maybe something like, but not restricted to a military coup, takeover, done.
I guess the irony is actually the fact that you got, again, these Western champagne socialists. They don't understand that if hypothetically this country becomes authoritarian, especially under the brand of Islamism, the first people they're going to come after is the same LGBT movement and the BLM movement who've been promoting them. They're going to come for them. Same thing happened in Iran. The actual revolution or the uprising was happening because of the communists backed by the Soviet Union in the 70s. There was a point where when the Islamists came and basically offered the the alternative, when they did the paramilitary coup with the help of the commies, the second day, the same Islamists, when they took power, they went after the communists.
On the 1st of June 2024, I was invited to speak at a rally celebrating British culture in central London.
So we are out here in central London. For the first time, a new movement is starting to get everybody from the United Kingdom, whether you're Scottish, Welsh or English, to get together, the united family, to not just be anti-things or just be angry, but actually to promote positively British values and our society in general, because we feel like we're losing some of it. At best, a lot of people are complacent, burying their heads in the sand, they have their own daily problems, but I think it's important. If you want to continue to have a good country in the future, we have to remind people, it doesn't matter if you're born here or not, it doesn't matter about your skin color, it's about your values. Everybody should be together, and of course a lot of people here are supporters of Tousi TV, that's very lovely to see as well. But we'll be here, I'll be making a speech later on, and we'll see how we get on.
Over 10,000 people of all races and backgrounds from across the country attended to express their concerns about the erosion of British identity.
Got a lot of lovely people here from across the country. We also got people coming from Canada, US, Israel, everywhere to support the British patriots. This is what I always say, we need to support patriots and nationalists in every country. You can't just leave each other alone. This is a globalized world and the globalists are undermining all our values at the same time.
What is a culture? A culture is the present day manifestation of your history. That's what a culture is. It's the present day manifestation, the context that we derive of who we are through historical precedent. And if you tell everyone that you're descended from slave traders, you destroy the culture, you destroy self-belief, you end up destroying the nation state.
Look at the crowd, ladies and gentlemen. Israeli flags, British flags, Iranian flags, American flags. We're all out, outside Parliament. This is the most beautiful march we've seen in a long time in Britannia.
I am proud of Britain and the sacrifices made in her name by much braver men than me. And I love freedom, hard fought for freedom. Not a freedom we should be proud of, a freedom we should be grateful for. The most important freedom of all, our freedom to speak our minds. And the grace to listen in return. Without that, there is no democracy, there is only tyranny. And we must protect our right to speak above all other rights. In just a few years, we have seen an attack on the people, the likes which it is still hard to fathom. We have witnessed just how fragile this freedom that we love can be taken away and how it can be lost. Freedom does not belong to us. It is not ours. We are here to protect it for others, especially those we disagree with, like it or not.
The real movement to fascism is coming from the very people who accuse those of us who wish to put the country first. It's from those people that the real move for fascism coming, because they're in bed with big business. They're the ones who are taking the shilling of large business to shut down debate and deliver policies which are not in the national interest. They want Brussels to run everything. What better way to do it than to actually legally remove the borders? And you get the youth of this country, the youth of Europe, being hijacked with the lollipop that they're able to go and have a cafe latte in Rome and then a supper in Paris without having to show their passport, not realizing that that minor convenience that they get comes at the massive damage to what it means to being French and what it means to being Italian. And what we need in the United Kingdom is an independent, sovereign UK, but what we also need is an independent, sovereign, strong, proud France, and the same as for Germany, Italy, and all the other European nations. We need nation states to re-emerge.
Nowhere, absolutely nowhere, is an Englishman's concern represented in our own parliament. And yet you have to pay for it. You are paying unbelievable amounts of money to people who are born overseas so they can live in this country. Half of the social housing in London is occupied by people born overseas. That is unbelievable. Unbelievable. This is what is happening to us every day by these people.
Reform UK is not against immigration. Reform UK is not against foreigners. Reform UK is not a racist party. My dad's Punjabi. Okay? What Reform UK wishes to do is to absolutely bring migration, slash it dramatically, so that the country can both economically and culturally catch up with where we're already at. So we can settle society. So we don't have the schisms that you see in society building up through multiculturalism. And part of that, by the way, is because of the regulations imposed by government for the promotion of ethnic minorities who've come to the country. And I'm really referring to the Equalities Act and Diversity, Equality and Inclusion and all the other regulations that go around it in order to give succour to the large numbers of immigrants who've entered the country, to the detriment, by the way, of the majority.
Now, this kingdom is a family. Whether you were born here or not, treat it as a family. If you're a British native, fight for your values. If you're a guest and a newcomer, respect the identity of the society. It doesn't matter, I don't care what your skin color is or your color of your hair, or if your pronouns are avo and caldo. You must treat it as a family. Now, I also have a message to all the British Christians out there. Ladies and gentlemen, we are having a crisis of birth rates and demographics. You must start having babies.
By 2083, if immigration and birth rate trends continue, the UK will be 54% first-generation immigrant. If you are majority first-generation immigrant, people do not have a cohesive and coherent culture. At that point, we've become an economic zone. We are no different than a gigantic airport where people stop for a time and fly away when the job prospects get any better. And if you think people want to bring up children in essentially a gigantic airport, then you really don't understand why birth rates are as low as they are.
The fight is between the globalist agenda and those who wish to promote and protect the nation states. If you vote Tory, what you get is basically Labour policies delivered more slowly, but they deliver them nevertheless. And you take migration, for example, it is at an all-time high at the moment. 1.4 million people came in gross in 2022, 1.2 million in 2023.
Lots of people, I think, who want children, I think it's 91% of women surveyed say they want 2 or more children, but they just haven't had them yet. Lots of people who have children are anxious about bringing them up in an unfamiliar culture. I mean, if the world on your doorstep is changing at a dizzying rate, what kind of certainty do you feel embarking on probably the most frightening, but also the most joyful venture of your entire life? What do you impart onto those kids? What shade of what trees do they sit in that you've planted if you can't yourself establish the roots of that civilization, of your own home, your own family? It's really quite worrying, and so I'm not surprised why lots of young people are taking Peter Hitchens' advice, essentially the Denethor strategy from the Lord of the Rings, to flee for their lives to other countries that haven't yet been fundamentally transformed by the policies of global homogenization. And I really don't want to leave. I don't feel at home anywhere except for little old England. It's not that other countries are pulling me there, but I have a funny feeling that I'm going to be chased sometime soon.
I mean, I don't want to use the word because it sounds hyperbolic, but we end up in a kind of totalitarian EU jackboot state where democracy is gone and nation states don't exist and cultures are gone and you've got mass migration and that's the end of Western civilization. That's where it's going.